Hi everyone, I am with Utkarsh B, Chief Architect, Flipkart at ETCIO Annual Conclave 2022. Thank you so much, Utkarsh, for joining me for this conclave. Um,
My pleasure.
so I want to specifically talk about a big a challenge that most organizations are facing today, and especially because of the accelerated adoption of data and AI. We are seeing a lot of cases of AI bias creeping into AI. So, how big a problem is that? If you can just kind of give an idea of the magnitude of bias in AI.
Yeah, I think it's a reasonably big problem, but I think as engineers we also try to circumvent those problems, and that keeps us going. And if you unlayer how AI works, at the bottom of it, it's all data, and data comes from tangible sources. Either humans feed the data, or machines extrapolate the data, and hence whatever tangible data sources are, biases naturally will creep in. I mean, I and you will have our own biases. You might have biases for certain food. I'll have biases for some other food, and the way we clothe ourselves up and so on. And if we humans are just dealing with this kind of a data day in day out, and layer the AI machine learning models on top of it, biases naturally will creep in. So that's forgiven, and that will. I mean, there's no way to circumvent it, in a way. So it all leads to the way we can do intelligent and smart and broad-based engineering on top of it. Tap into multiple sources. Don't just go by one human sources. For example, if someone is trying to build AI-centric models to study X-rays, if you go ahead and let's say work in a European city where maybe the nature of diseases are probably a lot more localized, you'll not learn, or the models will not learn as much. Come to a hotbed like India where the population is high, and also because of the diversity of our geo technicalities, the kind of cases that we see are much more broader. Go to Africa, go to America, and so on, right? And that is the only way you can widen, try to get in as many biases, almost make it broad based, right? Get every biases in, get every perspective in, because AI is nothing but data built on top of those layers. So that's the most trivial way of saying that, get not get rid of the biases, you cannot, but get in all the biases, fold in all the biases, and after that, just don't stay put. Keep on expanding those data sets as much as possible, because models can never ever be static. So that's my mantra.
That's great advice, and in fact, very ironical because anytime we talk of any challenge or any problem, we always say how to eliminate it, how to put it away, and here we are talking of bring in more of bias to actually eliminate it, which is very very interesting. But can you give one or two examples of, let's say, for an average business, how can how can AI bias impact their the business outcomes in any way?
Yeah, so let's probably take in an example of personalization. The day probably you would think about personalization, you would start understanding a human persona. And for Flipkart, for example, personalization and contextualization is a big enough theme, because there is a humongous amount of data that we have. We are selling millions and millions of products, bringing it to you, and we don't want you to get lost. What we want to do is understand you real time, personalize to your interest at that point of time, and see how you can find a needle in the haystack and get going with it. On day one it cannot be solved, right? At that point of time, if you say, I have studied a few people, right? Let's say, when any of these B2C ventures would have started, maybe the way you use these jargons and digitize people, educate them to do online shopping. I know hardly anyone knows the concept of shopping carts if they have not gone into the mall. And with those personas, you may get started with tier one cities, right? So at that point of time, what you are learning at its inception are just people who either have visited a shopping mall, or people who actually are digital enough to understand add to cart payments and so on, right? And you have just learned that code. And as soon as you start going to tier two cities, or tier three cities in India, where probably hardly anyone would have stepped into a shopping mall, And if they have stepped into it, it's a matter of awe first of all, rather than relate to that experience, and then you keep on going towards villages and so on. So if I use only that data set, to personalize for them, it will never work. And that's why, going back to my original cohort, that you need to include more biases, and it cannot always be digital. Probably do on the ground, right? Go talk to them, right? Almost face to face, just like we are doing. And maybe some of these learnings, if we can start digitizing, right? Or maybe just take them to a shopping mall in a group and say that let us see how they touch, feel, and experience that mall. I think those kind of learnings also need to be done, right? Otherwise, for us, for any B2C firm, right, you'll just be static. You will never cater to everyone, and that is one example of a bias which starts with people who are educated, and you are not able to take it to people who and educated as in digitally educated, and you will not be able to take it to cohorts which probably are still touching, feeling, and they would want to be part of the bandwagon, but maybe our personalization story is making them sway away from it.
So actually, the business can lose its customers if the AI bias creeps in. What are some of the common as well as most uncommon ways that bias creeps into AI, and also can it be voluntarily or rather put in by, let's say, a disgruntled employee, or it could be by a third party, or it could be a cyber attacker. So so is that a possibility, and what are some of the other ways through which it creeps in?
Yeah, but I think this part of the problem that you're just talking about is still manageable. The reason I say that is, when you talk about these personas of a disgruntled employee or a cyber attacker, these are far and few. I mean, it's a minority segment, but yes, they are also a high intent, to put in some malice. So as long as you're able to understand that there is a certain anomaly, right? It's more of an anomaly detection, that somehow this part of the data set that's just crept in, maybe is sounding a bit anomalous. So instead of folding into the model itself, I think the first few steps, I think modern AI, I'm a bigger preacher of data engineering. Understand your data truly, and try to make sense of it before you feed it into the model. Um, and it could be semi-manual. Human does it, or you say, okay, this data set, at least some of the attributions look a bit abnormal compared to the rest of the data set. Can I at least flag it for now before I put it into production, um, or maybe run it with a small cohort? Let's see how it performs, right, and how does it tweak the ML outputs and so on. And if I put it through that kind of a life cycle, maybe I'll be a lot more guarded, and maybe it gives a chance for us to catch it easily, and then react as required. But I think it's a manageable problem because, like I said, it's a smaller cohort, and probably we can be very sharp. I mean, you can use even ML models iteratively to even detect these kind of data sets. Yeah.
So this you said is the smallest part of the problem. What is the bigger part? As in, what are the other ways through which it can creep in?
Um, Bigger ways would be that I think it's more of um, we not expanding our perspectives, and hence it's all about how do you understand the larger purpose of what your business model is all about, and never be boxed. I think if you are working in a very aggressive business line, and there is lot more runway ahead of it, data cannot be something that locks you down. So if you are working with data instrumentation, you're working with data gathering, don't think about here and now. I think Flipkart is one example where I've been in Flipkart for 12 years. So I've witnessed that, firsthand, way back, I think 10 years back, when probably AIML was just about a buzzword, just catching up. The first thing we invested on was data engineering. We had a data platform, and our executive narrative was, don't worry about how data will be used, just pump it in. Let's not lose any golden data, right? And it could be in house, through our own systems, or it could be learning from outside. Keep on getting in all this data. So it's all about data gathering, not just within your scope, but also data which is outside your scope. You don't know what kind of insights you can gather out of it. So yeah, so that's how I would say the narrative should be. Not here and now. Data is always all around you. It should be for the future, and and your ML models then probably will self-learn, adapt, and tune your business for tomorrow.
Right. So what you're saying is that one has to get the back end architecture correct. You have to get it right. That is the most basic hygiene for a company to follow.
Yeah, so see, AI is no magic bullet, right? You just drop in and things will magically work for you. It's a layered thing, right? It all starts with data which is probably something that's not even meaningful to you at the outset. You start making sense of it, do some data engineering, data labeling, and maybe do some raw data insights out of it, right? So maybe even human in the loop, which is our traditional data analytics team kind of infrastructure. You put, you ask them to build, reporting out of it, and after that is when you start seeing certain patterns. You start converting into rules. Let me automate part of my processes because I see repeatability there, right? And that's when rule ins in, and some intelligence start coming in. And when your intelligence can be self-learning, you can feed in with a lot more data, because your by the time your data story is sorted, and this intelligence when can be self-adaptive, that's when you real true autonomy, and that's where AI and machine learning comes into picture, which means you're replacing a human with the with the machines doing the talking. So if you see, this is a layer, right? Right at the top is autonomous systems, and right at the bottom is human-based systems. And probably there is a crazy world out there where probably machines can have a similar gut feeling as us, which can be a bit scary of a situation. But I don't think that would be the case. As long as humans control the machines and not the other way, we don't need to worry about it. So all of it is getting layered, and each of these layers has significant complexity, right? Just holding tons and tons of data, right? Petabytes and beyond kind of data sets with you. You need to be very good in terms of big data engineering. Otherwise, you cannot make sense of it, right? It's all garbage. So labeling data sets, anomaly detectors, and so on, right? And also finding outliers. When your machine learning models are working for certain cohorts and not working for other cohorts, uh, all those kind of feedback loops should be there. And these are the layers if you have to invest in. Then probably AI at one point of time would be a magical bullet for you. Not yet.
So one last question, and it's a very candid question that I'm going to ask you. Do you think, I'll just give you an example of cybersecurity. I think no organization can claim that they are 100% secure ever. So if I just take the same analogy and alluded to AI bias, do you think an organization can ever be 100% free of bias in AI?
May not be. Yeah, so may not be. And I think the trick is in terms of realizing that there are biases, live with it. Like I said, I'm a believer of, understanding and living with certain assumptions that probably will never break. And this might be one of the assumptions that will never break, that there'll be biases. Because, like I said, data is seeded through certain source, and source will always have certain kind of biases. So as long as you're conscious of it, that this is an assumption that potentially may never break. We know there are many more assumptions in the computer science industry that are getting broken, but this is more of a fundamentals based assumptions that may not break. So if you are going to live with it, realizing that that facet, and then trying to work your way on top of it, that where do you not allow your biases to override the way business manifest value proposition wide to the end consumers. And that's where the feedback loop comes in. Be very watchful that it's not the popular cohort. There are multiple cohorts of end customers for you, and trying to understand how you are becoming relatable and how does your value proposition realize to the end consumer, um, in all good, bad, ugly ways. I think that feedback loop will make you uh, right on top where biases are silently creeping in. And as soon as you find that something is mismatching, right? It's not one value proposition, one cohort, some other value proposition, some other cohort. Whenever you'll see some kind of a mismatching happening, I think those are the things where you'll start flagging, and probably go down to an RCA saying that maybe there is a bias that's crept in, or maybe I did not, do my data engineering well, or maybe my models had too many parameters which probably are not applicable to this cohort. So I think, like we discussed, this is a layered problem. Layers at any point of time can go wrong. So finding that out through right instrumentation, right observability almost at real time. I think that's the trick.
Great. Thank you so much. I think that was very well said, and this is some great advice for other leaders as well to follow. Thank you so much. Thanks for your time.
Thank you so much.